welcome,
Hello,
Figile.
hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Noah, for hosting us again this
Sure.
week. Again, you said it's a continuation of our conversation last week. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, we continuing on the topic that we had about trauma, how we can deal with it, and most especially identifying it. Like we said last week, that sometimes you go through trauma, but you're not aware, or you went through trauma and you're still not aware, and the people you stay with also don't know
Mhm.
that you are going through trauma, but then they're looking at you acting, for them you're acting funny, you're temperamental, and all these sorts of things that they don't understand, and which at times will cause friction in the household, or with your friends or at school. You find, if you're a teacher, you find that this particular kid is behaving odd, and their marks are going down or the grades are going down, not knowing that they're actually suffering from a traumatic event, but they never had help, gotten any help. So we want to see how
Yeah,
we can deal with that.
talking about that.
Mm,
Yeah. Talking about that now, after our show last week, I realized that, you know what, I might have had certain triggers,
yeah.
but I wasn't aware. So, hey, thank you for the talk show. And let us know who's joining us today.
That's your job day. Let us know.
Is it my job? Oh, okay. I'll do the honor. Everybody, let's welcome Dr. Katlego Lekganyane.
Lekganyane.
So we needed to get an expert actually because last week we were just having a conversation,
Yes.
but we don't give advice. We don't say whatever works for somebody will work for somebody else. So we thought maybe Dr. Lekganyane will be able to assist us today.
Yes.
Welcome, Dr. Lekganyane.
Welcome, Doc. Evening.
Evening, everyone.
You
Am
are
I
on, but good evening, doctor. You on, but I don't know whether it's from my side. I can't see you on stage.
Okay. No, we can see you. We
Nope, I
can see
can't
you.
see you.
Yeah.
you can't see me?
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. Probably it's on my side.
Yeah. So, Dr. Katlego Lekganyane, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Firstly, thank you for the invitation to your platform. Great show, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm honored. I'm doing well, thank you.
We're also honored to have you.
Thank you, doctor. You're welcome.
Running a show like this with heavy topics such as the one that we're having, we really need to have an expert on this. Somebody who's qualified. We're not qualified. We can talk a lot between me and Figile, but we might be like a drum, that is being beaten without any note. So we need somebody who can orchestrate the orchestra, somebody like you. So our topic is about trauma, and it's a very serious topic. We're smiling now about it, for the reason that we just want to make this show a little bit lighter, to look at. But in effect, the topic is very sensitive, because whoever is going through a traumatic, what is that now? Traumatic event, they're not smiling at all. So we want to
Mm.
help them to see, there is a silver lining there. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. If you know what you're going through, you better able to deal with it, unlike if you don't know. So from your medical history or experience, how would you explain trauma?
Okay, so trauma, I think if we say the word trauma, so
Mm,
different people can think of different things.
yeah.
And I'd like to say that whatever that you think trauma is, most likely it is. So trauma, it's to sum it up, it's an emotional response after being at exposure to a distressing or a traumatic event. So it could be, if I say it that way, then you will realize that it could be really anything, really. So it can be from child abuse, it could be from neglect, it could be from bullying, it could be from physical trauma, like bodily injury, or it could be psychological. So then that takes us to the different kinds of trauma that people experience. So I just want to say that we do, if not many of us, we do experience like distressing events. So then somebody could come back and say, then if it's so common, if it happens to all of us, then why is it such a big deal? So what makes trauma a big deal is that when it starts being dangerous. So I think that's when most people, I think they doubt themselves whether they should consult or whether it's something to just deal with personally. So then trauma becomes an issue when it starts impacting your relationships with people. Like you said earlier, Neo, um, your relationships at home or with friends, if you start being aggressive or if you become moody, or in a case of a child at school, then the teacher would notice dropping grades or being aggressive with other kids. So I think the important thing, like you said, is to identify, to have just a clear definition of what trauma could be, and just know that it's not limited to physical abuse. Even people who experience war or refugees or people that have been in countries where they've experienced national disasters, they also experience trauma as well.
You know,
Wow.
you
That's a
mentioning some.
mouthful. Hey.
It is Figile. She's mentioning something very important there, about people who um, have been in areas where there's war and everything. We have refugees in South Africa, lots of them,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
I think a lot of times we don't understand who they are, and it's not necessarily because,
I mean, just being in a foreign country
yeah,
is traumatic on its own.
it's trauma on its own.
True, true,
Yeah.
Now
true.
imagine
Yes.
being in a new country is traumatic. They fleeing from their country because of war or
Yes.
unsettled events. It's trauma as well. So they got double trauma that they're dealing with, and and how we receive them as well. Can cause them trauma.
Yeah.
Fikile, I think you had something there. Yeah.
I was echoing what you said, Neo, that, thanks to Doc for joining us today. Now we'll actually understand. One thing I wanted to know is that how do we now then, if I'm an individual, because we're talking about it, but you'll find that these people, they don't really understand themselves, that they are going through a traumatic event. They experienced the war, probably
Mm,
didn't affect their area, but they flee before the war occurred in their country.
Mm.
That is traumatic on its own.
mm,
But how do you then recognize that you have experienced trauma before we can get to dealing with it?
yeah. So then trauma then would affect you physically or emotionally or psychologically. So physically, then what we normally see in patients who have physical manifestations of trauma, you would have nightmares, like repeated nightmares of certain events, especially with refugees or people who've been exposed to like a traumatic event. Um, you can have headaches, you can have mood swings. So that can range from being feeling depressed or feeling anxious. Um, Hypervigilance is also another symptom of trauma. Um, you can have, that's one of the few of the physicals that you can have. And then emotional, then you get people who get withdrawn from society. So sometimes I think it becomes easier to be identified that you are dealing with trauma if you are surrounded by people.
Okay.
If you have, like Neo said, like a teacher in a school setting, if you are in a family, then probably somebody will notice that you are different now. You're so irritable, or you are short tempered. You're being aggressive, or you don't sleep well, or they can just say that you're withdrawn, like they're not the way they used to. So most of the patients that I see are actually referred by a family member or a friend.
Okay.
I believe that.
But then some patients do actually come themselves.
So I believe you're getting a lot of patients, from this distressing situation.
Yes. So, okay, firstly, disclaimer, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist. So
Okay,
I'm a
thank you for
general
that disclaimer.
practitioner.
Actually, to echo your disclaimer, we are not giving any advice today.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
just actually talking
Enlightening.
about
Yeah.
it because
Mm.
as a society we are
Unpacking the
scared
topic.
to
Yeah.
talk about such situations. You know,
Mm.
we
Yeah.
don't wanna, or we don't know how to deal with it, so it's us just talking
Mm,
about it. Should you need any medical advice, you will
Yeah.
need to see a professional. We are not giving advice
yes.
today. Yes, you may continue, doctor.
Yeah. Yes. So, like I was saying, so I work as a general practitioner. So we are mostly seeing, we are the first point of care for patients before they're seen by a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So then what I would normally do, then I would take a history in a consultation, just try to find out what could be wrong. And sometimes it's not a clear cut trauma case. A patient would come and say, I'm not sleeping well, Maybe it's a patient that I know or see often. They've been missing work. Why do you miss work? I'm not sleeping well. I have continuous headaches. Is there any reason why you're not sleeping well? Or they'll just tell you that I just feel tired all the time, or they lose interest in activities that they will normally enjoy doing.
Okay.
And then you'll go further into observations and examination. So, firstly, obviously, you look at the demeanor of the patient. If you are familiar with the patient, if they come maybe unkept, or then you would have a high alert to wonder what's
Mm.
happening. And then we'll go to what we call an MSE. So an MSE is a mental state examination. So I'm just gonna discuss it briefly, like just an overview of what we do, like
Okay.
as we consult the patient.
Okay.
So firstly, like I said, it would be my own observation. If a patient comes into the consultation room in their pajamas, for instance, then I'll probably think, okay, something is wrong. Um, or if they're not kept, like maybe I could see that probably maybe they haven't had a bath. It happens. They haven't had a bath in a few days or so, or they're wearing dirty clothes. I mean, obviously, you would put it in perspective, like to how you know the patient. And then we'll go to the mood of the patient. So I always like asking first, how are you feeling? Because I might look at you and think, you look okay, but patients can actually tell you, I feel depressed, and they're smiling. So it's most importantly, it's history. And then also the way patients speak as well can kind of direct you um, on what could be happening, or what kind of mental illness they might be having at that moment. And then the thought form as well. Because with trauma, then, if you see a patient with trauma, you need to um, make an assessment whether this is an emergency, an urgent patient that needs to see the psychiatrist now, or if it's somebody that you can make a referral for and then they can see a psychiatrist or a psychologist in a few days or weeks. So that then we discern from the thought form. So we look at how the patient, as they speak, as you ask questions, their thought form. Is it somebody who's coherent in what they're saying and insight as well? Do they recognize that there might be a problem? And the other thing that we put as a danger sign or an alert sign would be suicidal ideations. Because you have patients who would need urgent help. If they are suicidal, they will tell you, sometimes they won't, that they've been having thoughts about killing themselves. Then that kind of a patient that you need to assess as an urgent patient, sometimes they have to see the psychiatrist that day, or they have to be admitted for observations in the hospital.
Okay. Now, if I understand you correctly, Doc, you're talking about an adult here. We mentioned
Yes.
earlier, or you mentioned earlier that there's a lot that constitute of a traumatic event. It could be child molestation or child, like the child was sexually abused. How do you then see as an adult? Whether it's at school, whether it's at home, or I'm a neighbor, is there a way of me picking up to assist this child, or it is a matter of the
Yeah.
parents will have to see that?
So with kids, then I always say parents shouldn't dismiss even the subtle changes in your children. If you feel that, parents, sometimes you have a gut feeling that, okay, this child is acting strange, you might try to determine what could be the problem by talking to your child. They might disclose or not. But then certain things, especially with kids that have undergone sexual abuse, parents would come with signs like, suddenly my child is hiding when they have to bath, and normally this child is like, you know, they don't feel a sense of privacy. Suddenly they do, or they hide their panties, or they so just subtle things that you're unsure about. I always tell parents that with children, if you have a gut feeling, just bring them in. Even if we can do an examination and find that it's nothing,
Okay.
you have lost nothing really. Than to sit at home and think, "Ah, let me just, see, let me wait a few weeks or so." Because you'll never know if there's repeated insult that could cause later on chronic trauma. So if you see any subtle changes, just like bullying at
Yeah.
school, a child will suddenly tell you, or they'll start acting up and say they're sick, they don't want to go to school. You take them to the doctor, nothing is found. Clinically, they're fine. And then they'll keep repeating the same thing, or they'll always come up with excuses to avoid school. So that's one of the that's one of the symptoms actually that you find in people who've undergone trauma as well, avoidance.
Okay.
So they'll either avoid the place where the event took place, or they'll avoid anything that triggers the recollections of the traumatic events.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So with children is because mostly I work with adults. So with kids it's a bit tricky unless you're specialized in children behavior, so that you can immediately know. But then it's a multidisciplinary approach, because with children then you can have play therapy for them to disclose. Sometimes they do drawings. They explain their feelings more when they're in a very comfortable or familiar environment.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
that's
All right.
insightful there.
I think that helps a lot.
And you're talking about bullying, and I think this has been undermined a lot, in the communities. Bullying at school. We grew up being bullied at school.
Yeah.
I've been bullied as well at one point in time at school, and at one point I didn't want to even go back to school. And the bullying does not even come from the kids, your classmates. I mean, a teacher can also um, give you that sense of bullying in the way,
Yeah,
in the
bullying.
manner they, yeah, in the manner they talk to you, they teach. I mean, I have this teacher I love dearly still today. But when I thought about punishment, oh my word, she was the worst. I knew, I knew Thursdays were, yeah. I don't want to use the word
You don't want to
in
go to school on
Afrikaans.
Thursday.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to school
It's
on.
funny how, especially to see it in retrospect,
Yeah.
that it
Yes.
was me.
Oh, I didn't want to go to school on Thursdays.
Yeah.
On Sundays, this is how traumatic this was for me. On Sundays, my parents bought me a bicycle, and on Sundays I would ride my bicycle the whole day or most of the day. And when the sun sets, then I would stand and look at the sun setting, and I'm thinking, this sun is setting for my sorrows. Tomorrow I'm facing trauma. Really, I think I need some counseling, doc.
We're not laughing at you, by the way.
I need some counseling.
You
I was
do. You do. The
I
fact
was
that you
look
still remember this
Most
to
of us
date.
actually do.
I was looking at
Most of us actually do. I always say adults need therapy.
yes, yes.
I was about to ask you as well, Doc, as to, I do, it's just my belief, but I need you to confirm this to me. We usually go seek professional help, whether it's a psychologist or a psychiatrist or seeing a social worker or talking to somebody when things are already
Mm.
bad.
Mm,
Do you think it's advisable for an individual to go and visit either you as a GP or visit a psychologist or any other counselor, even when they feel like things are going correct? Like I said when we're beginning the show, is that after our last week's show, I felt like, you know what? I think I need counseling right now because now the conversation
Yeah.
triggered some things that I was ignoring because I thought maybe it's a way of life. But today I feel
Mm.
like, you know what? Maybe I need to see somebody. Nothing is going wrong
Mm.
now, but is it advisable for me to go and see a professional, even though there's nothing wrong now?
Sure. Yes. So it's not, the point is not that something is wrong. The important thing is you identifying the dysfunctionality that probably you went through and probably that you're still continuing in your own adult life. I think it's with trauma, people shy away because they feel like it's not physical, it wasn't sexual, it wasn't,
mm,
like I said, trauma can be a vast, like, different things. So the important thing is introspection. Because when you decide that you need help, you have already identified that,
It's a
okay,
problem.
this, yeah, this is a problem, and probably also identifying patterns in your life on how you do things. It's probably impacted by what I went through. And you feel the need that you want to change that. So you can do that. And some people actually, um, that then comes into chronic trauma because probably it's something that you experience in your childhood and then you're just identifying only now as an adult and you see how your decisions are actually informed by what happened like many years ago
Yeah.
and you want to change that. You can still go to therapy. You can still even go through the process of healing yourself. But I think therapy helps that you have somebody who is subjective.
mhm.
I mean, who have an objective eye. They won't side with you. They don't know you. It's good to have a support system like your family or friends. But I think with a professional, then they won't buy your face. They will tell you what is happening. They will tell you, and whether you like it or not, it's something that you
You need
go
to,
out
yeah.
and you know that you have to deal
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I think you're now identifying ways of dealing with trauma. Is there anything else you can add on
Hmm.
that, on how to deal with trauma as an
Yeah.
individual, whether
So
you're
with
a child or
trauma,
an adult?
yeah. So I think then we should actually have a safe space to normalize, like you're doing now, Neo and Figile, on this platform. I think the more we talk about it,
Yeah.
people become comfortable with actually talking that they have experienced it at a go. Like if you experience trauma now, we one thing that has shown to prevent in most cases chronic trauma symptoms or disorders like your PTSDs is debriefing. So the difference between counseling and debriefing is that debriefing is actually addressing the issue immediately after it happened. So debriefing can be from you actually seeking debriefing from a psychologist or a professional, or even in institutions like a facilitator assisted debriefing. Let's say in a workplace, a colleague passes away, or there's a traumatic event that happens, like maybe a hostage or a robbery. Then you gather your stuff together and then you discuss what happened and how we might feel. Because the thing is, with any distressing event, it is normal to feel frightened, to have fear, to be
Yeah.
vigilant, or to be emotional at that moment. So then, if you discuss it earlier, I think then, and then also to open a space to say that, this is normal. I mean, it is a traumatic event, but if you still feel that, it has impacted your functionality at work or at home, you are more than welcome to come and seek further professional help.
Yeah.
So that then I think it creates a space for people to open up, to discuss, unlike bottling things in and, soldiering on. And then later on, you realize that things have changed in your life.
Yeah.
So I think debriefing, counseling, normalizing talking, obviously finding a safe space. Not that people should, blast their problems to anyone and everyone, but just find a safe space where you will be able to unpack what happened. And sometimes you actually do need a professional help, especially in events where maybe it's medical trauma or sexual or physical trauma, then you need to take it further on.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Can I
Talking
jump
about
in?
that as well. Yes, 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 no, jump in.
Um, Doc, from your line of work, who is most likely to seek help? Especially after suffering traumatic event, or you are able to see that this person has gone through trauma, but they're not even aware, or they're not taking it. They don't identify that they have trauma. They're struggling from trauma. Between men and women, who are most likely to respond to seeking help?
So, funny enough,
Mm.
women are most impacted by trauma. Um, but then the good thing is that women actually seek help earlier than men. So I think it's how society has dressed us
Yeah.
as human beings. There's certain expectations, or we feel that there's certain expectations from society as a man. You can attest to that. No, I don't know. Or even as females as well. I think we are given a space to cry, and it's okay,
Mm.
to be emotional, and it's okay. So you find women actually, because we're such emotional beings, I think most women are most impacted because then you can see earlier, I think, than men with their emotions, mood swings, or whether they're sleeping well, or how they work, how they interact with other people as well. So, um, generally, women tend to seek medical help in anything really. They are before men.
Yeah.
Something is wrong with men, eh? Sure.
That
But
that's
another
very
another group,
interesting. That's very interesting.
No,
We were
something
talking
is
about the
wrong with
very same thing
society.
last week to say the society actually
Mm.
tells us that men don't cry.
Yeah.
And men has got almost they've got emotions. They feel pain as well. What do we mean when we say men don't cry? How do we change then how males receives the news of seeking help? Because I can see maybe Neo needs to see somebody needs to speak about something that is troubling him.
Mm.
So how do I gentle break it to Neo? Do
Yeah.
you know as an
So
expert?
I think I think the solution then lies with us women, starting with your boy child, um, giving them the space to cry, to express how they feel. Then they grow up to be healthy men who know that they have emotions. And if they go through a traumatic event, they don't have to hide it, they don't have to carry it. They can disclose it. So make it okay for boys to cry. They have emotions, they're not of a different kind,
Yeah.
like in terms of feelings. That we are all human first before we are categorized into macho and soft.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's no hope for
And with
Neo, but there's a hope
adults,
for my boy child.
no, there is hope for Neo as well. Uh,
I'm just joking.
yeah. Yes. So even with us, sometimes we shy away. I think to ask men, how are you
Mm.
feeling? Are you sad?
Mhm.
Because we assume then, no, but probably he'll carry it so well. He's fine. I do ask my patients, Mr. So and so, even if you've gone through a traumatic, let's say, for instance, like bodily injury, I'll ask you, is it painful? How are you feeling that you can't use your arm now if you're in a cast or something? Because I think we contribute to what the problem is now. We just need to identify and to be aware
Yeah.
on how we interact as human beings. Before you see Mr. So and so father to this nation, and just see a human being that the same way you can be impacted, they can be impacted
Mm.
as well.
Mhm.
Let me,
Thanks, Doc. You
let's
know,
change gears.
mentioning this, I was reading this.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, no. I was reading this article. I was reading this article, and I could take it to how we deal with a loss. It could be in the family. It could be at school or at work. We forget about, say, in the family space. There's a loss. We're looking at the adult. If the husband passed on, we're only looking at the wife. We don't actually find out how the kids are receiving this. Because, yes, they all lost. The father lost, the wife lost the husband, the kids lost the father, but we tend mostly to pay our attention mostly to the adults and forget about the kids. Or it could be a sibling in the family, and we will only looking at the parents and forget that this sibling had other siblings who are impacted about the loss. How do we then actually change our views as human beings? Because I think this is troubling most human beings.
Yeah. So I've seen similar scenarios that you're talking about, Figile, now, where you're so worried about the wife who comes in, obviously in her black clothes, mourning clothes, and you're worried about her. Like, how are you continuing? You fail to ask, who do you live with? And then this lady has children.
Mm.
They've also lost a father, and also with siblings as well. We'll look at the mother, and mother's lost a child, but then also the sibling.
They lost it.
So most of the time, then we would also offer family therapy as well.
Okay.
So it won't just be one person. So we'll inquire to say, Who do you live with? Do you have other children? Is there anyone that was staying with you, with the person who departed? And you find that the least person that you expect to be impacted is the most
Vulnerable.
impacted person in the family. So it does it, yeah, the most vulnerable person. And sometimes I actually a few days ago had a patient who lost a child, a 17-year-old. And I asked her, do you have other children? Yes, I have an 11-year-old boy and a younger one, a 3-year-old. So the 3-year-old, most young kids will keep asking, where's whoever
Whoever,
ever? And then they'll
yes.
try to explain it in a nice way.
Mm.
Um, that could be, I guess, from their point of view on how they understand loss and what death is. But then this 11-year-old has a full understanding of what death is. But then nobody's asking about him.
How are they
Or the mother
feeling? Yes.
actually replied, he's dealing with it so well. And I said, how do
How do
you
you
know?
know?
Mm.
Yes. How do you know? Because this patient was going for therapy. And I said, how do you know? Like, what do you mean he's dealing with it so well? He says, no, he's the one who actually comes and checks up on me. And sometimes I'll be crying in my room. And I say, do you ever ask him, like, how he's feeling or what this means to him?
Mm.
And she was startled, like, okay,
Yeah. Taken aback.
and as if it's her grief alone to feel. Yeah. But I think it's with us as well. I think the more we understand the impact of trauma, then we'll be able to discuss it openly and we wouldn't expect others to carry it so well um, than others. So I think talking about it, actually asking, are you well? What does this mean to you? I mean, sometimes, and also just try to, obviously, there's a way that we do it. You don't want to bombard people with questions when they just lost a loved one, but just also try to identify and also check in on each other and just try to see that are we really coping? And grief is really, I always tell people, there's no time frame to grieve
True.
Yep.
because people then feel that
Grieve
okay, if I didn't
differently.
cry in this
Mm.
month, then it's done. Like you have to get over it. Like this person is long gone, so like move on with your life. You find
Yeah.
people who have breakdowns a year later because they haven't really tapped or dealt or spoke to anyone about the grief that they're going through.
But a dog.
You're not talking about that. I'm just looking at. Yes, Neo, you can go.
Uh, we're talking about patients that are coming for consultation. We're talking about family members. Um, but we've been through a lot in the past 2 and so many months from COVID. Losing our loved ones, losing our colleagues um, because of COVID. But has anyone asked Dr. Katlego Lekganyane, how are you doing? You see, um, we, I don't
You
want, I
are
don't,
taking it well, Doctor.
I don't want you to answer this question, but I'm just thinking, we have soldiers, medical soldiers like you, who were in the forefront of this pandemic. You've worked 24 hours. If it was 25 hours and was possible, you would have done so. And I wonder if you have been appreciated, that you have done so much for the community, for every one of us. You know, seeing the numbers. I sit here at home. I look at the internet and I see the numbers, how many have lost their lives. But you are there with them when they lose their lives. And for me, I cannot even fathom
And I don't look at
the
the numbers.
feeling of seeing somebody losing their life. How do you deal
Yeah.
as a doctor?
Yeah, I think that's another big topic
Yeah.
that actually has come to the forefront. I've seen, like, since COVID,
Mm.
um, healthcare worker burnouts and trauma as well. So it's good you asked, because I've seen there's a platform. I went to the SADC, the South African Depression and Anxiety Association, group. Sorry, uh, they have. I see they're launching, I think, sometime in August, to all the healthcare workers that are probably listening now. There's a close group for counseling, actually, for healthcare workers,
Okay.
because we've been seeing a lot, I think, recently of, before COVID even. Um, I won't say the name, but there was a well-known healthcare worker, physician, pioneer in his field,
I know
who
exactly who you're talking
lost his
about.
life, yes, through suicide. And it was a big shock to the world, you know. But I think as well, it created a platform to actually start the discussion of trauma, repeated trauma that healthcare workers go through, and how sometimes they tell you at work, we have to march on, you know.
Mm.
You're not expected to be on the other side. You have to find a way somehow to continue and deliver a good service to your patients.
Yeah.
But I always say to patients, or to anyone really, you cannot serve from an empty cup.
True.
Yeah. Yeah.
You cannot serve from an empty cup. And I've learned that for myself as well, that I need to be okay to be the best service provider that I can be, to be the best mother and partner. So I think if we take that for ourselves, everyone, that, because sometimes we are so loyal and so indebted to our works that we disregard
Yeah.
ourselves. So I think with healthcare workers, it's a syndrome, really,
Yeah.
that you have to die at work. You have to die on the line of duty. Like, you're sick, but just, a few more steps to help a few patients. And then, yeah, it's sad, but I'm happy that there are platforms that have been opened now to discuss such things as healthcare workers.
I think
You're not touching
using
on
this
the
analogy. Yeah.
well-known, sorry, no, touching on the well-known physician we lost. I think it was a traumatic event to most healthcare workers, and some are suffering from mental health. Now my biggest question is, because I'm very closer to people who are affected as well, to say they view mental health. I think it's still a subject that is not
Mm.
understood by many,
Mm.
and he. The person kept on saying, you know what, you will cry for a week after my passing if I kill myself through depression, because losing a patient is not an easy thing. As much as you'll have to deal with the family that has lost a loved one, you yourself, you've lost a patient, and it's traumatic to you as well. And when they say you'll cry and you'll forget, that takes me back to say, okay, now how do I help this person to know that we recognize them, we appreciate them, we appreciate what you, doc, as much as we don't have that close relationship, but I appreciate what healthcare workers are doing, the nurses, everybody who deals with a life, because you want to save a life. And if you lose that, it's a traumatic event on its own. So how do I, on the outside, how do I give support? As much as there are platforms open for that, but I've got people around me. How can I help those people?
Um, and there's one particular patient that I see every 3 months or so. He once asked me, I came here, they said you were not here. They said you were sick. What was wrong? you know. And now I thought, oh, that is so and so, like, "Oh, can we help you? Like, And
Yeah.
he insisted, no, doc, what was
You're
wrong?
also
Yes, I
Like, are
human.
need
you
to
okay?
know.
You're also human.
Yes. So he actually stopped, and I just looked at him, and I said, okay, you're insisting. Hey, you're not going to stop. He's like, no, I need to know what was wrong.
Yeah.
Because I came here, they said you were not here. I came again, you were
And you're
still
still
not
not
here.
back.
So it was a time when I had COVID and my husband had COVID. So I said, I had COVID. Thank God I'm fine. I'm back here. And I was trying to, get back to business. And he said, oh, okay. Are you sure you're fine? So ever since, he's made it a habit when he comes in, he sits down. For 5 minutes or so, I know I won't ask him anything. He will ask me, how are
Yes,
you?
you need to
Is your
answer to
family fine?
him. How are you doing as a person?
Is your family
Yes.
fine?
So how do we become
And
like that patient as human beings out there? Because I think like you are saying, we view you as a person that we can just offload all our burdens
Yeah.
and forget that you are human as well.
Mm.
Not only you
yeah,
as a healthcare worker, in the past 2 years, I realized that I need to ask how the car guard is doing. You know, usually it's a matter of hi, hi, hi. Like you're dismissing everybody. You get to the cashier, you're dismissing everything.
You are
So
so
how do
nice,
I become a
Figile.
better person to say, hey,
You are so nice. You even say hi,
huh?
hi, hi. We learning one or two things from you.
No, you try to dismiss them. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. That, since COVID, I
Mm.
realized that what I was doing, I needed to change,
Mm.
and I need others to change as well.
Yeah.
Greet the person who is a cashier. As much as they are working there, we all know they're working, but how are they doing? So
Yeah.
how do we become better
I think it
people
goes back
out
to,
there?
yeah, it goes
Starting with
back to the
me.
basics. It starts with self. If you are in touch with yourself, your feelings, then it's easier, isn't it, to see it, or like the way we see ourselves is the way we see the world. So if you are in touch with your own feelings, I think it becomes easier for you to actually see the same in others. So I know we live busy lives, but also, just the basic, be kind. Be kind. Because with mental health, um, I always tell people, you'll never know what people are going through. You'll never know what people left at home. So just be kind. It won't cost you a thing. And,
Yeah.
just that gesture of kindness for somebody to actually ask you, how are you? it's it can change the way you going to go about your day. That somebody actually took that few
The whole
minutes to
day,
ask you, are
yes.
you well? How are you? um so I think it's just the basics with anything. Really, you start at the basics. You don't have to buy things for people, or to just, if you start
Yeah.
from self.
You just need to. We just need to be human.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you start from self.
Yeah.
I
Better
went
human,
through.
because we are human. We just need to be better human.
Yeah. So I went through a research from the National Center of Safe Supportive Learning Environments. I don't know if you're aware of it. And one of the things that they mentioned there uh, is how do you identify somebody who's going through trauma? And one of the things you also mentioned their behavior changing and all of that. Now, for quite some time, we've been talking about drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and we're not associating it with trauma. We just associate that with bad habits.
Mm,
But in effect, somebody would be abusing drugs, alcohol, because they're running away from the pain that they're going through or
I
they've
feel.
gone through. So the only escape for them is to uh, abuse that or overindulge in that so that they have a break in what they're feeling. So these are some of the things that I think as family units we really need to be serious about. Sit down and look at the behavior of each other. You might know me as Neo. Um, for a disclosure, we grew up together, Dr. Katlego. You might know me as that Neo, but I have changed. You find that my wife is not able to deal with me because there's something that happened and I did not deal with it. So I'm just giving you a general explanation on that. So identifying those things, it's actually a loving thing that we can do towards our family members. Have moments that we sit down, we intimate with each other, we speak deep with each other, and we know each other. Because a person does not wake up in the morning and says, I'm going to kill the whole family. There are triggers. What are those triggers? Can we identify those triggers and work around them? And one of the things that I also saw on that report was specifying about the brain. I think this one, it's your specialty. You'll know about it. You wouldn't be a doctor, I guess, if you didn't go through that.
Yeah, so it's
Um,
not necessarily
I'm
just
not. I promise you, I'm not a doctor. So it spoke about the emotional brain and then the thinking brain, where trauma happens in the emotional part of the brain, where it associates. Correct me if I'm wrong, doctor. It associates pain with events, but we need to move from the emotional brain to the thinking brain to say how can we apply, how can we identify things that are triggers, and if you are able to identify them, we are better to deal with the situation. It might not go away.
okay.
If somebody has been sexually abused, you can't erase it. But how do you deal with it? You see,
Yeah. So
I found it quite interesting.
okay, so the part where you were talking about the brain, actually, there are studies that have been done to show that actually chronic trauma does actually alter the way your brain looks, like your like morphology of the brain and activities of the brain. So sometimes I always say that it doesn't. People see therapy as a quick fix, and unfortunately, it's not. For some people, it's something that you have to do until you are done with this life. Um, especially with people who have gone through chronic trauma. So this would be re-exposure or repeated or sometimes complex, like intertwined events that mount onto each other. Then these are patients that would need sometimes. So with therapy, then you get psychotherapy. So psychotherapy, I don't want to use technical jargons, but this is
Yeah, because now you have lost me,
so
Doc.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Trauma is such
You
a
have lost
vast
a human
topic,
like me now.
and most of the interesting or intense things are done by your people who actually specialize with mental health. So this will be your psychologists and your psychiatrists as
Yeah.
well. So there's different modalities of treatment. It would be drugs. This will be your antidepressants, your antipsychotics, your mood stabilizers, and sometimes they'll give a treatment for your symptoms. Like I said earlier, that trauma can manifest as physical symptoms. So people who have chronic headaches, then probably they'll need something for the headache. Or if you're not sleeping well, you'll get
Yeah.
something for sleeping. But then there's other parts of treatment that psychiatrists or psychologists do. That includes re-exposure. I don't know what they call it. I think there's a specific name for it. So where they expose you to what the trauma, let's say somebody, or to the place where it happened. So that has also shown to help,
Mm,
like re-exposure. Eventually, then you don't have your hyperreactivity, like when you get those triggers, or when you pass a certain place, or when you see certain images. Then that helps as well. And sometimes they do what is called CBT, it's cognitive behavioral therapy. So that as well, also to acknowledge, to be aware. I don't know if you've seen in movies, they will say for patients who, for instance, have like anxiety attacks, probably they have like flashbacks of the events, traumatic events. You have to literally tell yourself, I am safe, I'm alive, and you have to breathe. Because
mm,
then you might pass a McDonald's, probably you got robbed there or something. Every time you see a McDonald's ad, or then you start having like flashbacks or hyper
yeah.
reactivity. Yeah. So it's part of therapy to identify that it is not happening. You are safe, you are alive, you're not hurt. So I think it's a repeated and a long term thing. So there's no quick fix, really, I think. Yes, it is a process.
It's a process. We're going back to what we said earlier, that you know what, even if you feel like everything is fine in your
Yes,
life, you
yes.
still need to see a professional, just to talk about certain situations, you know. And thank you very
So,
much, Doc. Thank you for blessing us with your presence and the information that you shared with us today.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. I wanted to share an experience about trauma, but we running out of time.
sure,
I
I
think
didn't see the
we
time.
can take it up with our next show. It goes fast, eh? It
I
goes
think
fast.
all the time when we have such interesting conversation, we run
Yeah,
out of time.
we do.
I guess we will have to invite you again,
Thank you.
Dr. Lekganyane, and then we sit down. I mean, we
Yes,
need to talk about such.
Yeah,
As
yeah,
much as we can assume that not everybody is listening,
yeah,
that one person that is listening at this moment
yeah.
can get help, can help somebody else as well. So I think between me and Noah, we will need to
no
invite you
problem.
again
I'd
to
love
join
that.
us.
Yes. So with that, Dr.
Thank you.
Lakayan,
Thank you.
maybe you can you have closing remarks before we wrap up our show, and then Figile will also wrap up as well.
Okay, to the audience, I hope the take home message becomes then that trauma can be mild, moderate, or even severe. Don't overlook what you think might be trauma in your own life. Rather, seek professional help. You can even
Yeah.
go to your GP. They will do the basic assessment and identify whether you need to see a psychologist or a therapist. And there's also other platforms as well that help with symptoms of anxiety and depression. So, like I said before, you can go to SADAG. It's SADAG official. You can find them on Facebook, I think, and Instagram as well. So they have toll-free lines that you can call anytime. They even have a WhatsApp chat. I think they have a list of numbers that people can access. So it feels safe, and there is hope to get better. I think most people then feel that their trauma might be unique and there's no hope. They just have to deal with it. Deal with it the right way. Feel free to get professional help. And again, Figile and Neil, thank you for inviting me. It's a wonderful show.
Thank you, Dr. Lekganyane. Hey,
Thank you.
everybody who's tuning in, I see some of my audience are complaining that they joined in late. You haven't missed out much. We do have a recorded show on our YouTube channel. On my bio, those who are on TikTok, you click on my bio, it will take you directly to our YouTube channel, and then you can rewatch this. Thank you very much, Dr. Lekganyane, and thank you,
Thank
Newa,
you
for
so
this
much.
platform. Stay tuned for our next topic in the next week.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And yes, the recording will be on YouTube as well. The channel is Get Informed 2, TOO, Get Informed 2. We will upload this recording in the near future. So thanks, Dr. Lekganyane, for joining us. Thank you, Figile, for co-hosting with me. And thanks to everyone that have joined. This is not an easy topic, and we understand that you are not even sending questions and comments because they need to simmer in and just have a look at your situation. But if you do need to contact somebody, like what the doctor has said, it's SADAG, SADAG. That's correct, Doctor?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So you can look them up. I'll also get their numbers and then have them on a recording for you. So thank you for joining Neo Morabiri Production Talk Show, and we promise that we will have another show again that is informative and that you also enjoy. So this is us wrapping up the show. We thank you and have a good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Even- even-
Okay.